So I'm here today with Annabella Urell from Stress Free HR, and what I wanted to talk to you today about and ask you about is the experience of a startup and how that kind of comes into HR and what problems come up. So what's been your experience?
Okay, so I can give you an example. So I used to work for Just Eat as their head of HR, and what I can explain from that experience is that with Just Eat they grew from 50 to 1,500 in 5 years, which is massive exponential growth, and with that comes a lot of challenges. So a business that starts up that is small starts off in a family environment. The culture is one of the family-friendly environment. Everybody has input, everybody gets involved in the decision making, and everybody's asked for their opinion. And so what happens in a growing business is that as you grow, slowly you start to bring in more people with more expertise in specific areas that you need. And what sometimes can happen is that people start to feel left out. Yeah, they're no longer asked for their opinion because they have someone else to ask. They're no longer part of that decision-making process because their expertise doesn't fall within that. So that's one example of the culture changes.
And so you dealt with that what both sides, like the people and also the business?
Yeah, of course. So what's happened is that being in the HR role that I was in, often I would have employees who would come to me because I'd built that relationship with them, and they felt comfortable enough to come and let's say have a moan, because people are people at the end of the day. They have emotions, and if they feel left out, they potentially can start to feel disgruntled. And as the culture in a business that's growing starts to shift, because naturally it will, whether the business owner wants it to or not, it will start to change. It's just about how you manage those expectations. So that's an example of one of the challenges that happen. Another example of the challenge is that as a growing business, often you don't have the money to pay someone immediately for the skill sets you need. So what you do is you employ the people with the skill sets of what you need now. Right. And then what happens is you start to grow, and suddenly you need more of these skill sets. And as the roles become a bit more diluted, and you start to bring people in, again with that whole people start to feel left out, what happens is that you bring other expertises in, and those loyal people who you feel really loyal to, who were there at the beginning, who mucked in and did all of the stuff that you needed them to do, what happens is that they don't have the skill sets anymore about where you want them to be in your business in the future. Right. Yeah, they had the skill set at the time, they don't have the skill set 6 months later, a year later, about where your business is at that time.
And presumably those people are also thinking, well, I've just had some stuff taken off me, some work. Does that affect them as well? So
it's not so much the work has been taken away from them, but more that they don't have the skill sets about where the business is at that position at that time. So what happens invariably is that you end up with people who don't have the skill set you need anymore. Right. Yeah, you need people who have the skill set in the roles 6 months to a year later.
And presumably, as these businesses are growing, the people who own the business, presumably if they're a growing business, they might not have an HR person, is it?
That's right.
And so they're presumably having to sort of juggle being different people at different times. Is that?
Yeah. So one of the challenges that I've helped businesses with is actually exiting loyal employees who were there at the beginning, helping them grow and be successful, that they don't need anymore. Right. But they don't want to say goodbye. They feel like they can't say goodbye. So actually they've got potentially employees who they are damaging the relationship they have with them by not saying goodbye. So the way I help businesses is help exit employees who have been loyal, but in a way that makes them feel good about going. Right. Not feel upset that they're leaving. Right. And that's the difference between having an employee who leaves and is disgruntled and talks badly about you when you leave, rather than an employee who feels that they were valued for the time that they could deliver their expertise at the stage in their business that they were required, but not sat twiddling their thumbs now because you've got nothing really to give them, because their skill set has expired in terms of where your business is at that point in time.
And so if a business wanted to get your advice, how would they go about it?
So I work in a variety of ways. So I can work either on site, in the business, where people can come and speak to me, when I'm there, or invariably what the reality is of how I support most of my clients is that they have me on a retained basis. They pick up the phone and they just ask me, they double check things with me, they ask me about what the plans that the things that they're planning on doing to make sure that not only from a risk perspective, what they're doing, is it too risky, but also how it impacts the engagement side of things with their staff, because what might seem like a good financial decision in terms of people, the damage that could potentially do in terms of engagement might outweigh the financial benefit.
Right.
And so when I have those discussions with my clients, what they end up with is a scenario where they can make an informed decision around the whole element, rather than just focusing on finance, or rather than just focusing on one element. They look at the bigger picture and they make a considered decision rather than one that's just driven potentially by money, which is usually what the decisions are focused on.
But presumably, if they're like the first time they've worked with you, presumably they need to kind of just really understand where it all fits into things. So, is there anything do you do anything like an audit or something like that?
Yeah. So I always recommend to my clients that have potentially a bit more established clients that have perhaps 25 plus employees, that I come in, I do a complete audit of their HR function, and that covers things like succession planning, their recruitment process, and making sure that they're recruiting the right people and future-proofing, like the scenario I was just describing. And I look at their existing culture. So one of the things that I often ask the business owners and their senior management team, for example, is to describe their business in 3 words. What's it like to work here in 3 words? And often what I find is that everybody describes it differently. And what that tells me is that if the senior people can't describe it in the same 3 words, I can guarantee that the staff don't really understand what the culture is, because it hasn't been embedded. It's not consistent, it's not been communicated. So when I draw these things out of the audit, I then provide a document which demonstrates a little bit of background around why that area of HR is important, what the state of play is in the business at that moment in time, and then I put my recommendations about how they can improve that if they want to, and then it's up to the business which ones for them are a priority, if any at all. Yeah.
That sounds like something that'd be like really useful at like various stages as well.
Yeah.
Like, as you grow, even if they're not using you straight away all the time, but presumably there are like little milestones when actually it's time to come to you and go, this year, this is what we want to do.
Yeah.
And kind of get your leadership, and then maybe retain you to make sure that happens. With that.
Yeah. So I tell all the people I meet who I ask, do they have a HR contact? If they say no, I say introduce me.
Right.
It doesn't mean they need to use me there and then. What it means is that when the need arises, they have someone who's been recommended already.
Right.
Because the reality is, once you start employing people, there will come a point where you might need a HR consultant for whatever reason. And I encourage my clients to be proactive about HR. Now, come on, let's think about it, right? In most businesses, you have a finance director, an operations director, a sales and marketing director, but then there's no HR.
But then your people are the most important part of your business.
Exactly. They're not only the most important part, but they are usually the most expensive part of your business. And they're the people who touch your customers.
Yeah.
So, there's a famous quote by Richard Branson that says, treat your employees, how you treat your employees is how they treat your customers, right? So you need to consider how engaged your employees are in your business, so that when they do talk to your customers, they come across in a way that they are passionate about your business and talk well about your business. But I think the key point is that there is no job for life anymore. It's not really how it works anymore with the way that business has evolved. But what we can do, what certainly I can help businesses with, is that I can create an environment where even if you have to exit an employee, it's done in a way that they become advocates for your business, so that they continue to promote you even though they don't work for you anymore. I mean, that's great.
That's what everyone wants. Isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
No, thank you, Aaron.
Thank you.
Thank you.